Thanks for doing an interview with us. What's up?
It's Brad. He
Again?
says there's a problem with the database server again.
Okay, so what changed?
Well, according to Brad, nothing.
Of course it didn't. You know what? Why don't we have SCM on that box?
You've met Brad, haven't you?
Yeah.
How is SCM going to help a user like Brad?
It'll help you notice when things in your environment change unexpectedly.
You don't say. Really?
Yeah. Okay, I'll start with something simple.
All right, then.
What we're looking at here is a machine that has had its configurations tracked for a while. And there's a few different things that we can look at. For example, hardware. So you can see that we're tracking all sorts of aspects of the hardware right now. And some have had a baseline set to say this is normal, and anything higher or lower, I want to know about. In fact, if we take a look at the hard drive has had some interesting changes where somebody changed the capacity. Now, they made it better, right? You know?
Yeah, no serial number, but
Yeah,
somehow the capacity just got bigger.
But the capacity is bigger, and this probably is a case of, automatic expansion on a virtual disk. So I'm not 100% sure this is something that I would worry about per se, but it is definitely something that we'd want to know about, right?
Well, it's data.
Yes.
If you're researching this, and especially if something's gone wrong, that's a piece of data that help you, do the forensics, right?
Right.
You say, oh, I can see. Not only can I see what was changed, but I know when it was changed.
Exactly. And, I think some of the other hardware inputs that are there, whether it's CPU or memory, might be more interesting. But the other thing you can do is track software, which goes way beyond just installed software, which we'll talk about in a second, but also things like operating system updates. So, for example, if this machine had some updates, which we've got right here, you can see that one of the patches was removed, which is kind of disturbing to me. Like, why did you remove a patch?
Well, it's not uncommon to roll back a hotfix.
Okay, fair enough. But like you said, it's data. If something is not right, this is input. A little bit more normally, I would say, is that you can see that patches were added down here later on.
See, now they got the correct patches installed.
You're a good storyteller. I like this. And again, just knowing that the change occurred was important. But again, another thing is just knowing actual software that's been installed or removed. So, for example, here we've got software that actually hasn't been added or removed, but it's been upgraded. So we've got two very important pieces of software, the SolarWinds Agent and the SolarWinds WPM Player. And they've both had their versions upgraded from one version to the next in both cases. So, but if something was installed, you'd see that. The other thing worth mentioning is that the new way of showing log information is to remove the unnecessary lines. So there's 123 lines above and 9 lines below. That nothing changed, so you don't have to see it.
Right.
So this isn't the whole config.
No. But I mean, you want the user to focus on the changed items, right? We don't need to have all those unchanged lines there, right?
Right. But there's other things you can track. For example, here on this system, we've got hardware, software, but also folder content monitoring is another item here. So here they're actually tracking the SCM demo folder on the C drive to see if anything in there changes in some way. For example, if I go look at that first config file, 001, I can see that it didn't exist on May 5th, and now it does.
Right. Interesting.
Right. And then also here, config number 4, interestingly enough, 4 did exist on May 5th, but 2 lines have changed since then, and 1 line has been removed.
Wow.
So yeah, I don't know what this config file does particularly, but again, if something is going wrong, this may be the pointer to tell you that, all is not well in Denmark.
Well, it's also this thing, this could have been a proper change. There could have been a change control process, something was deployed. So in a way, you could think of SEM as this tool that can help you somewhat validate that your deployment has worked as expected.
Yes, absolutely. Did I know that was going to change? Yes, I did. Fantastic. And like you said, did it change in the way that I expected is also something to know.
So that's nice. I like what I see there. But it really felt to me when I was looking there, it's kind of mostly focused on just server and applications, but maybe it's a virtual server. I guess what I'm asking is there any type of DevOpsy story here?
Oh yeah, SCM can totally dev your ops. Before we start, I think it's important that we lay out on the table that no one is trying to say that configuration monitoring is going to address every single aspect of container monitoring or DevOps in general or anything like that, right?
No, not at all. I mean, configurations are an important part of that, but it's just one piece. And DevOps is a little more encompassing than just, configuration files.
Okay, good. So we're not trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes or anything like that. But I will say, as a Linux aficionado, one of the key aspects of any application, especially applications running on Linux, are the files. That the files, as they change and go through different sort of transitional states, they tell a story of their own. And I feel like containers are really just files. So if you track them,
you're being a little. I think you're oversimplifying what a container is.
maybe just a little bit.
But on the more serious note, a container is going to be a series of configuration files, right? So that's the stuff that you really want to be able to track and be on top of. And SCM is going to be able to tell you, yeah, there's something different in the configuration file for this, container or group of containers.
Right. Now, one of the key aspects of that is dealing with not just, configuration files, which are a series of lines like a log file is or a registry is, but files that are actually more structured data. They're JSON or XML data. And SCM can handle that in a very particular way. So I want to illustrate that and then get back to containers for a minute. What I've got here is actually the output of an application called Pi-hole. I've got a few Raspberry Pis at home, as many IT folks do. Use them for a lot of different fun side projects. One of the side projects is this application called Pi-hole, which captures and then blocks ads as they come into the house, either because they're things I don't want to see, or they're spammy, or whatever they are. And you can pull statistics out of it. It has an API. And so you can tell like how many domains are being blocked, how many DNS queries it's done, and so on and so forth. And I just want to point out that this right here, this is the data that it outputs, right? Like that. So looks fairly unstructured, but anybody who knows what, JSON looks like knows that this is actually the format. And when SCM ingests that and processes it, it comes out looking like this. So it understands where blocks begin and end. And it also understands that if a block moves up or down, that isn't a change in the log file. That's just the block moving, and that's okay. So what I get flagged is when something actually changes. Here, the number of DNS queries has changed. Meanwhile, down at the bottom, I can tell that, for example, this block, which is, Gravity last updated, 4 more lines there. So Gravity last updated file exists, so on and so forth. And then there's a relative block, which is a sub block within that, and so on. It understands to nest those and keep the integrity of those blocks in place. But meanwhile, also note when something changes. So this isn't, again, not DevOpsy or containery, but it just shows that SCM can handle the structured file format of XML or JSON. So that when you get to your containers, now what I'm doing is I'm actually monitoring in this JSON test, I'm monitoring the folder of all the containers on a machine I have here in my lab. So you can see that I've got a variety of different containers. Each one is running a different application. And I've got the config file, the host config, host name, host resolver, and so on in each one, and those are being tracked. And there's been some changes. So for example, I can tell here that somebody stopped the container. That's no big deal there, but I can tell that it was running. And then when I looked at it again, it was not running. The process ID and all that stuff stopped. But you can find other more meaningful changes. For example, here, I can tell that somebody restarted the container, or someone or something restarted the container. The process ID changed, the start and finish changed, and other elements down below. And in fact, I could see other things. If I added a mount point, if I added software, that would show up as well.
So I noticed you're running MySQL.
I'm running MySQL on this one. MySQL is running. And just to point out that this container, the one that stopped, is actually the one that's running my WordPress instance.
Ah, that's what it was. I figured something was up.
Right.
So I really like how you were mentioning the blocks if they move, because with the idea of the declarative programming, which is these ARM templates that you're finding in Azure, where basically a lot of structure is just being shared through JSON files, and you might move things around for whatever reason. But I like how SEM is going to be like, oh, I recognize that that's just a block. It's the same block as it was before, so I'm not going to flag that one. I like it because it's reducing the noise.
Right. It's limiting the things that you're going to get told about. On the other hand, the other thing that I like about this is that these two containers are actually tightly coupled. And one is now not running and the other one is running. Now, since you're, an Azure person, what would that say to you as somebody who's, working with an organization that has, a large number of containers running and doing things?
If one's up and one's down?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe some patching going on? Maybe.
Sure.
Maybe.
Okay. I will point out that this has been down since 2 days ago.
Yeah, you're the Linux lover, so this is where you say that's how come, it takes 2 days to patch a Windows machine.
Got it. Fair enough. I was also thinking that my MySQL instance has been running for 2 days without anything talking to it. Possibly, and that there could be some charges associated with that.
Oh, yes, there will be some charges associated.
Yeah, so that's kind of an important thing to know. I know that when we talk about DevOps and containers, a lot of people's minds immediately go to the ephemeral state of containers that spin them up and spin them down and make 100 and then kill them all 5 minutes later and things like that. And that's good, that's fine. But some containers are more persistent than that. And when you do have persistent containers and something happens, this is a great way to know about it.
Absolutely.
But after all that, I'm still not clear how SCM is going to address the Brad issue.
Okay, now the Brad issue is the simple fact that Brad likes to go inside to that database server and make a whole bunch of changes.
All right, but it's SQL Server, so it's not a registry, it's not a file.
Oh, but it could be. It just depends on what he's trying to change in order to get his crappy code to work. Here, let me show you what I mean.
Okay.
So one of the great things about SCM is that it can also monitor registry keys, right? And I've pointed it at the HKey local machine software, Microsoft SQL Server, because for something like a database server, you might be interested to know if registry changes are happening. The great example I like to use is the backup directory. That information is stored as part of a registry key. So SQL Server will read this upon startup, right? But the thing is sometimes you think about, hey, if I get access to the database server, if I can run queries and do it, you don't even need access to the database. If you get access to the server, or better yet, if somebody has access to it accidentally, with your help, overwrites that backup directory key, it might be that you could redirect those backups somewhere else. Let's just say it's a bad actor, as we talk about, right? Somebody with bad intent. So they somehow trick an admin into doing whatever, and lo and behold, now your backups are being rerouted somewhere else.
Well, right. I mean, like a linked directory to an offshore storage or something.
Possibly. So, it's just a piece of data you'd like to have and know about and be aware about if you were a DBA. Hey, what's changing on my server? Why did these registry changes happen? So SCM has the power to monitor for registry, and I think that's incredibly valuable for those application servers like an Exchange server, a database server, your BizTalk or your SharePoint, right?
Yeah.
You'll want to know what's really happening, and SCM just makes that really easy.
Which is all well and good, but it still doesn't answer the question about how we catch someone like Brad in the act of messing up our day and then telling us that we did something wrong. Like, I don't see that here.
Well, Brad could have done this, but Brad most likely is inside the database doing things. He's probably one of those devs that has a little too much access rights,
Uh-huh.
and is just allowed to muck with things because he thinks, yeah, this is just the way things will be better this way. I read it on a blog post, but we can do that. So another way for us to get that done is you can output the results of a query to a file, right?
Uh-huh.
And that's what I've done here. Is I've simply just done a dump of sysconfig using, I just put it into SQL Agent, but you could, however you want to run the query, as long as it outputs to a file, SCM can do a diff of the file. So that's what we've done here. On the left, you see the original settings, and you can see Brad, right, change the max server memory from the default of 2 terabytes to now a default of 4 gigs.
Right, because a number that begins with 4 is clearly larger than a number that begins with 2.
The logic of Brad and the wonder of Brad never ceases to amaze me. But yes, he has made a change here, and I've tracked it. Now, configuration changes, it's one of those things that I think a lot of DBAs recognize the value of saying, I need to know if somebody's made a change inside of sysconfig, right?
Yes.
And right now, there's no native way to get that kind of done inside of SQL Server. You really have to kind of do it for yourself, monitor it for yourself, set up a trace or extended events, but that's something you manually have to do. But SCM would kind of make that even easier for you across your entire enterprise, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's great.
Well, I'm glad we got that sorted out before booth duty was over.
Hey, this place has shawarma. You want some shawarma? I want shawarma.
Absolutely.
Let's go.